Okay, so again, thank you for joining us today. We appreciate you spending the time to learn about moving from WebTop to EMC Documentum D2. Manuela, if you're ready, we'll jump right in. Just so you're aware with us today, well, I'm Larissa Primavera. I'm the Director of Sales for our FME US group. And we have Manuela Bernhard, who's our Managing Consultant for ECM here, again, in FME US. And we have Christian Mayer, who's our Senior Consultant, and he's also Head of the Competency Center for EMC ECD, formerly IIG. And our special guest speaker today is Roger Behari Lal from Adlib. He's the Director of Product Marketing for Adlib. So we wanted to take you through just high level of FME, who we are. Some of you may know, some of you may not yet. A D2 overview and configuration options, the D2 4.2 features, and then we'll talk about implementing D2 projects, so project challenges, deployment strategies, a little bit about our product migration center, the sample project approach, and frequently asked questions and webtop challenges, so when you're moving from webtop to D2, and any customizing in D2. Then we'll talk about lessons learned. And then Adlib will talk about how to retain the advanced document to PDF transformation with D2. And as mentioned, at the end of the session, we'll have a Q&A. We'll try to keep it within that hour time frame in lieu of your schedules. So a little bit about FME. We were founded in 1995 in Braunschweig, Germany. I mentioned that Manuel and myself are from our U.S. group. We were actually founded on March of 2010. We're coming up on our 5-year anniversary in just a couple of weeks. We have 150 plus employees and offices throughout Germany. Our development office, I mentioned Migration Center, so our development on our products, Migration Center and also DocSpread, are done in that office in Romania, and also any custom or individual software development for our customers. We focus in on the ECM space, mainly in EMC, ECD, but also in SharePoint. So we have a SharePoint team out in Germany and an Alfresco team out in Germany. In the United States, we just started our SharePoint team here, so that is another area we'll be focusing heavily on in the United States. And in business intelligence, we partner with a company called Click, so we and their product ClickView. So we work in implementations and within that Click environments as well. So from here, I'll turn it over to Manuela, and she'll get into all about D2.
Okay, thanks a lot, Larissa, for the short introduction of FME. So with the next few slides, I want to provide you with a quick overview over D2 before we dive into some more detail later on. So now, what is the main difference between D2 and older technologies like Webtop? In the past, the main development and customization part took the majority of the efforts, whereas only a small part of the requirements could be fulfilled only by configuration. Because of the high customization level, the maintenance efforts were pretty high. So for the ones of you who have worked with Webtop customizations before, you will know the difficulty even just going to a new patch level. It might mean to merge XML, JSP, and Java files. So now with the D2 approach, this changes, and most requirements can be fulfilled only by configuration means. There's still some topics left that cannot be implemented by configuration. There are always limits, and D2 offers some options there to take care of those last 20%. We will talk a little bit more about that one later on. But for the most part, this configuration approach highly reduces the maintenance efforts and also allows you for better structured and more consistent applications. And with the newer web technologies, you're also able to create nicer client experiences for your users. Now this slide just lists some of the configuration options that you have available in D2. There are definitely a lot more to explore which are not listed here. Just to mention a few, with auto-naming you can dynamically fill any attribute values for a document, whether it is the object name or any other property on your object type. You can build the values as a combination of any other available information in your system, including date values and automatic counters. With the auto security, you can set dynamic permissions based on specific conditions of your document, such as, for example, different lifecycle states or different attribute values. Then we have auto-linking. Auto-linking allows you to dynamically create all the necessary folder structures based on information that is stored on the document. So that way you can make sure that all your documents go into the expected folders. This can be one or also multiple folders for each document. Then we also have workflow configurations. Those use actually your existing workflow templates in your repository, but they allow you to add another configuration layer on top of it to define how your workflows should look like and be used within the D2 client. And another one to mention are the lifecycle configurations. Here you have some complex configuration possibilities to define what should happen with your document in the different lifecycle states. So there are a lot of options here, but please note that those D2 lifecycles have nothing in common with the standard Documentum lifecycles. So those are actually separate objects inside the repository. There are also two additional modules available along with D2 that I want to mention shortly, which are C2 and O2. C2 allows for different kinds of PDF modifications. For example, you can dynamically add watermarking and signature pages to your documents. And O2 provides a simple Office integration. It allows you to synchronize your attributes with Office properties in one or also in both directions. Now, in the beginning of last year, the new version 4.2 for D2 was released, which was addressing some items that referred to key topics: productivity, information integrity, and agility. Now, this slide provides an overview of what was introduced or changed with version 4.2, but I don't want to go into too much detail here. I just want to point out a few of the items that we've come across. So, there was a recycle bin introduced to allow for soft delete of documents so that they can be restored if needed. Then there was the model of intelligent URLs introduced, which allowed to call D2 with specific commands for document actions. Another change was that properties, attributes could actually be edited directly in the widget. You don't have to open the separate properties screen. Then there was a drag and drop functionality introduced from the file system, but also from Outlook with according configurations on how emails and attachments should be handled. The creation wizards were simplified to show less screens, only what's necessary. And there were also enhancements in the management of the configurations. And a thin content client transfer was introduced as an option when Java is not available or cannot be used. So this just as like a few items pointed out. Now the next D2 release is labeled Hawk, and this is expected to be released within the next few months. There are several promising enhancements that have been mentioned before, like to increase the usability and productivity. One example was, for example, the multi-document support and workflows that we know some customers have been looking for or asking for. So we are very curious to see the new release once it's out. So much for a general overview over D2. Let's now look closer at the topics related to the implementation of D2 projects, especially with the background of coming from Documentum Webtop. There are different project challenges that you might face in your environment. Firstly, there might be requirements for completely new applications, for example, to provide a Documentum solution for a new business area to store or manage new content. And the question is, what are the implementation options and which technology should be used and why? Should you maybe just stick with any existing infrastructure, like any existing laptops you have in place, or should you set up something completely fresh? And the next question would be, can every requirement be implemented with the chosen technology? Then secondly, there might be new requirements for already existing applications, which would lead to additional strong customizations and high efforts. So in this context, it might make sense to review the current technology, such as Webtop, to decide whether further investments into the current technology make sense at all, or whether this might be a good point for a technology change, such as going to D2. Then thirdly, there might be new environments and platforms introduced as new standards in your company, bringing up the need to evaluate on how to migrate your existing applications onto that new platform to be able to decommission any old applications and infrastructures over time. And last but not least, there might be already other application environments existing, and the strategy might be to consolidate environments as much as possible. So the strategies are, for example, to reduce the number of repositories or reduce the number of servers or reduce the number of applications in general that need to be maintained. So in this context, the need comes up to review the existing applications, reevaluate technologies, and come up with the different options, different approaches, what a consolidation could look like. Now, what typical questions come up in those mentioned scenarios when looking into replacing Webtop? Should we introduce D2, or what are the technology options that we have, and when is the best time to do the replacement? What is the impact for the IT side? What will the future system landscape look like after the technology change, and what are maybe the different infrastructure options that we have? What is the impact for the business side? How would they work with the new application, and can we fulfill all of their requirements? And what is, as a minimum, necessary for them to accept the new solution? Can we migrate all of the current Webtop functionalities to D2? And what will it mean to port the existing customizations? What is simple, what is complex, and maybe what is not possible at all? What will it cost us? That is, of course, an important question to consider as well. There are likely additional license costs involved. Then there are the project and implementation costs, and after go live there will be the associated maintenance costs. So they all have to be taken into consideration. Does it economically make sense? This question is closely tied to the question before. So costs and business case and business value have to be looked at. The costs have to be compared with the current and future costs that the old Webtop application would cause over time, including maintenance, application, and infrastructure costs. Should we, or do we have to migrate all applications to D2 at once? So there might be multiple Webtop applications in your application landscape for which a strategy needs to be defined. And there are different scenarios possible, from migrating only one application at a time to maybe migrating all applications at once. So the different possibilities need to be looked at and evaluated with their pros and cons. And what is our risk? So each project, especially when introducing new technologies, comes along with different types of risks that might happen. So they need to be thoroughly looked at to decide whether it is still manageable and acceptable and how they could be dealt with. We won't be able to answer all of those questions for you in this webinar, especially as they highly depend on your specific project situation, of course. But we hope to be able to give you some pointers and ideas. Now, when implementing a new application based on D2, there might be different deployment scenarios possible depending on your project situation and your current application environment. So in the first and easy scenario, you're deploying to a completely new environment that is still empty and there are no side effects that you might need to consider. Any existing documents out of other applications and environments can be migrated to initially fill the new application, for example, by using our product migration center. So Migration Center already has a D2 importer available, which allows you to, for example, apply D2 rules for auto-naming, auto-linking, and auto-security directly by your importing your documents to the new system. In the second scenario, there might be already other applications running in the new environment, but the applications coexist side by side. So they do not share or access the same content files, but for example work with different cabinets in the repository. So also in that case, there are no major side effects to be expected, so it's very similar to the first case. Now the third scenario adds an additional layer of complexity by having parallel applications that actually also do share and access the same content inside the repository. In this case, it has to be made sure that documents stay consistent no matter with which application they are processed. So the same rules need to be applied by either of the two applications. And the last scenario describes that an existing old application is completely replaced and exchanged with the new technology. In that case, it might be necessary to change the existing documents to meet the requirements of the new application and to comply with the rules that the new application enforces. This might mean to possibly rename documents or change other attributes, or also to link the documents to new locations. It might also be necessary to maybe completely change the underlying data model to add new attributes that the new configuration model requires. But also for this scenario, Migration Center can help you with converting your documents to the requirements of the new D2 model and to apply any D2 rules as needed, also in place inside the same repository. Now this slide provides an overview over the basic architecture of our product Migration Center. It has been on the market for about 10 years and has been EMC certified for most of those. It consists of three main components, which are the client interface, the database, and the main worker component called job server. The client provides a Windows-based user interface that guides you through the rule migration process. For all these standard migration cases, all necessary actions are possible directly here. There is no additional scripting or programming necessary. Then the core of Migration Center is the Oracle database. All the source information, transformation rules, and transform target information is stored directly here. The main business logic and critical processes are performed directly here on database level for high performance throughput. And then we have the job server, which is a Java-based component that can run on Windows and Linux-based environments. On source side, it connects to the source system to extract all relevant information and documents. And then on target side, it connects to the target system to import all the transformed documents to the new environment. There can be multiple instances of this job server setup in the network to spread out the load and to allow for high performance throughput. Migration Center offers a wide range of migration paths, which is the path from a supported source system to a supported target system. You can see a lot of them listed here in this slide, but for a complete list, please visit our Migration Center website. Just to give some examples, on source side we have, for example, the file system adapter, a very generic database adapter, an adapter for Nodes databases, for SharePoint, and for different Documentum flavors, back to version 4.x. On target side, you can see different systems listed as well, but we also support different flavors of the EMC Documentum platform. As I mentioned before, we have a special adapter for D2, and also end of last year we released an adapter for EMC Info Archive. We also offer the ability to develop any missing adapters on source or target side by adapting our provided API to support any special flavors of systems that are maybe currently not covered or not best supported, but also to support maybe any additional special project requirements that you would like to add to any of the adapters. Now here you can see a summary of the most common use cases that Migration Center supports in general. I could spend quite some time on this slide, but I only want to point out a few items for you. The first group of use cases, migrate, refers to data migration scenarios to bring over content from one system to another, for example, to fill a new application. So when we think about our earlier discussed deployment scenarios, this can help us to migrate documents from an existing webtop environment to a new, fresh D2 environment, while also at the same time applying our new D2 rules in the background. In that course, we can also change the data model completely as needed to convert document types and change any attributes. And you can use this chance also to clean up the data model and the folder structures, or to remove any old documents that are not needed anymore. Just to give us give an example, as part of a project solution, we have also executed this same functionality in place for an existing repository, so that we adjusted the documents for the new D2 application without actually moving them to a new repository. We changed object types, applied new attribute values, and converted the document for the use by a new D2 application by applying the D2 configuration rules at the same time. In similar scenarios that fit any of the topics discussed in this webinar, you can also find in any of the other columns that are listed here. At last, I just would like to highlight a few more capabilities of Migration Center for you to be aware. So, it supports data migrations. That means that data can be migrated while the source system is still in use by the business. So, after an initial migration, data migrations can be executed to only read the data that was changed or newly created since the last migration. And this we can repeat multiple times until the final cutover window is reached, when the system will be shut down for the business, and then the final data will be migrated to the new system. This drastically reduces the required downtime. And migrations can be run on a defined time schedule. That means the whole process of scanning, transforming, and importing can, for example, run automatically in the background. And Migration Center provides full auditing of all activities and is suitable for sensitive and regulated environments. In fact, it has been used by many of our life science customers in the past and is also currently used. Let's now look at some more detailed questions that might come up around the D2 implementations. I'm happy to have Christian with me in the meeting, who will support me with providing the answers based on his and FME's experience. So give me just a second. Okay, so Christian, you're there?
Yes, hello. So let's start with the FAQ of my part. Let's start with the first question.
Does D2 use UCF?
So the version 4 of D2 does not use UCF anymore.
Okay, great. What are the minimal requirements?
So with the latest version of D2, this is version 4.2, at least Internet Explorer 9 and Java 1.7 update 51 is required on the client side. In addition, also some other browsers are supported, and on the backend side, the Content Server 6.6 is at least required.
Okay. What are the components of a D2 installation?
So D2 consists of different components. We have two web applications. The first web application is responsible for the user interface, for the business user. The second web application is the configuration client. This is a client for the administrators who configure D2. In addition to these two web applications, we have to deploy DAV files. These DAV files install new object types, jobs, and methods in the doc base. And in addition to that, you have to install some libraries on the message server. These are the components of D2.
Okay. Do I have to migrate my documents to use D2?
So it is possible to use D2 on an existing doc base, on your existing structure. But if you want to use the D2 features or configure D2 feature, then it may be necessary to migrate the documents. But in general, of course, you can use D2 with an existing doc base.
Okay. What technology is D2 based on?
So since version 4, the D2 client, the D2 user client, is based on the Google Web Toolkit, especially the Censure GXT framework. This is an extension for the Google Web Toolkit.
Okay. Do you need Java to run D2?
I already mentioned that Java is required on the client side. This is not really true. So in the latest version of D2 4.2, EMC introduced a new feature called Syn Mode. And if you enable this SYN mode, then Java is not required on the client side. But you will use some user-friendly function like drag and drop. So you have to decide if you want to offer a highly user-friendly client, or if you want to offer a client with less user-friendly functions and without Java.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Can I reuse WDK components?
Unfortunately not, because D2 consists of a different technology stack and different frameworks, so you cannot reuse WDK components like JSP pages or XML files and the Java classes.
Can I customize D2 beyond the configuration layer?
Yes, this is possible. So D2 offers some extension points to implement custom code and to implement custom logic within D2.
Very good. Is drag and drop possible? What about Outlook?
Yes, D2 offers three kinds of drag and drop options. So first of all, you can drag and drop documents, files from your desktop, from your file system to the D2 client. It's also possible to drag and drop from Outlook to D2, and of course you can drag and drop within the D2 client from one folder to another.
Okay. Are TBOs supported?
Yes, TBOs are supported with D2.
Can I use Webtop and D2 in parallel?
Yes, this is also possible. You can use Webtop and D2 in parallel, and I will show you two different scenarios for this use case in a few minutes.
Okay. Can I implement all my Webtop customizations in D2?
So the approach of D2, you already mentioned, Manuela, is configuration. So first of all, you should think about configuration. Mm-hmm. And if this is not enough for your requirements, you can use the extension points. Mm-hmm. But D2 is not so powerful with customizations than Webtop or the WDK framework. Yeah, with Webtop or WDK, you can nearly customize everything. D2 has more of the approach on configuration and less customization.
Okay. How do life cycles and workflows differ between D2 and Webtop?
Let's start with life cycles. So you already mentioned D2 has its own life cycle implementation. That means that you configure the life cycles with the D2 configuration client. You can also use Documentum lifecycles, but if you want to use the power of D2 and the different configuration options, you have to configure the lifecycles within D2 and use the lifecycle implementation of D2. Workflows. So D2 uses the default Documentum workflows. That means that you have to configure workflows with the Documentum Workflow Manager. And in addition to that, you have to configure a workflow configuration with the D2 configuration client. This is necessary to configure some extensions which are provided by D2.
Okay, good.
So let's talk a bit about typical Webtop changes. That means typical requirements which are coded in Webtop and which can be configured in D2, that you have an impression how powerful the D2 configuration options are. So let's start with custom search screens. This is something you can configure in D2. With D2 you have the advanced search, which is similar to the Webtop search. For the advanced search, for example, you can configure the different object types which are offered in the search and also the attributes for each object type. In addition to that, D2 offers so-called query form search. The query form search is a search formular, and you can define a DQL query behind this formular and execute then a search. And of course, with this feature, you can configure your custom search screens for your custom searches. Apply lifecycle during document creation. This is another feature which you can configure with D2. So D2 has the so-called creation matrix configuration, and there you can configure all the different object types and then types of documents which are displayed in the D2 user client. And in this configuration you can configure if D2 should apply a lifecycle directly when the document is created. Attribute-based folder navigation, that means if you import or create a new document, that the client or your application creates a folder structure, a folder hierarchy based on attributes. This is something you can configure within D2 with the auto-linking configuration. Auto-numbering, auto-naming for documents, also a requirement which is often coded for webtop application. So in our projects we have often implemented a unique number, for example, for documents. And this is something you can do with the auto-naming configuration of D2. There you can configure that each document gets a unique number when it's created or imported. Department structure. A lot of our clients and customers uses a webtop application for different departments, and each department has its own cabinet and some special features and its own document type and things like that. And this is something you can easily configure with D2 with different applications, and these different applications run in the repository, and you can configure different object types, different security settings, different auto-linking and auto-naming features, and all the configuration options which are provided by D2 for each application, that means for each department. PDF watermarking. So this is also often a requirement in customer projects, and with the extension called C2 you are able to configure PDF watermarking for documents which are exported or viewed with the D2 client. So the C2 plugin provides configuration possibilities that D2 prints a watermark on PDF documents when they are, for example, opened or exported. Complex property screens, design and conditions. So with Webtop, the possibilities to design or to configure property screens are very limited. D2 offers more powerful features for property screens. So first of all, you have more features to lay out and design your property screens. So for example, you have different columns, you have tabs, you have borders and things like that. And in addition to that, you can also configure different value lists for controls, and there's also options to configure dependencies between attributes. That means that you display or disable controls based on other attribute values. And this is of course more powerful than the features Webtop is offering to you. Workflows and e-signature are also features which you can configure within D2. So let's talk about the customizing options D2 offer to you, the extension points. A lot of customers ask for that, and I already mentioned that D2 offers extension points which you can use to implement your custom code. And I want to explain you the most powerful three customizing options of D2. So first of all, we have custom widgets. D2 provides default widgets, like the document list or the browser tree or the view of the relation or version. These are default widgets which are provided by the D2 client. And in addition to that, if you want to display additional information, or if you want to display some custom controls or anything else, you can create custom widgets and integrate these custom widgets in the D2 client. For example, in the screenshots you see a toolbar. This is something we have developed for a customer. On this widget you see different icons, and when the user clicks on these icons, then this widget executes D2 actions. A custom widget is separate web applications which has to deploy on the application server, and it is integrated as an iframe within the D2 web application. And D2 communicates through the custom widget with the so-called OpenAjax HAP and JavaScript. So this is a mechanism to communicate between D2 and custom widgets. Yes, the second customization possibility is the D2FS API. This is a SOAP web service which is also used for the D2 user client. And with this web service, with this API, you are able to integrate the D2 capabilities within your own application or within your own integration without the graphical user interface of D2. And the advantage of this API is that, for example, if you import a document or if you modify a document, then your configured configuration are applied to these objects. That means that the D2FS service uses the configurations of D2. And if you use this API for your integration, then your documents, for example, gets a unique number or are imported to the right location and all these things. So the third very powerful customization options are plugins, D2 plugins. A plugin is a jar file which must be dropped to the D2 web application, and this jar file contains Java classes, your custom Java classes, which extends default D2 classes. And there are two behaviors or two kinds of plugins: action plugins and listener plugins. So with an action plugin, you are able to add custom actions to the D2 client. So for example, if you want to open your own help document, or if you want to execute your custom logic within the D2 client, then you can write your custom action, create this plugin and drop this plugin to the D2 web application, and then you are able to execute your custom action, your custom code within the D2 client. Another option is the listener plugin. This is also a very powerful customization option, and I already used it several times. I already mentioned that D2 provides this API called D2FS, and with the listener plugin you are able to modify the existing behavior of such a service. For example, this API provides a dialog service which is responsible to display the dialogues or create the layout of the dialogues. And if you write a listener plugin, then you are able to modify dialogues, for example. Or there's also a search service available, and if you want to modify your search, then you can create a listener plugin which overrides the search service and add your custom code to this listener plugin, and then this is executed on the D2 client. You have three different kinds to override a service or to integrate your custom code. So you can add your custom code before the service is called. Then we have a pre-processing. You can add your custom code behind the service is called, and we have a post-processing, and of course you can override the service itself. So for example, if you want to make some checks before a document, before a dialog or property page will be opened, then you can implement custom code before the service is called, and then with a pre-processing for this listener plugin. Okay, another question I often get when I'm on at customer site is if a customer can use Webtop and D2 in parallel. I already mentioned it, that this is possible. And there are two main scenarios for use Webtop and D2 in parallel. The first scenario is that Webtop and D2 are installed on the same doc base, on the same repository, but that each of the client uses a different cabinet and a different data structure and different security permissions. That means that Webtop works in one part of the doc base and D2 in another part of the doc base. That means that we have no data overlap between a Webtop application and the D2 application. This is the easiest kind of the easiest use case to use Webtop and D2 in parallel, and of course you can configure the new D2 features for your application and use these features in your or in the cabinet which belongs to the D2 application. This is very easy and a very smart and a smooth integration. The other scenario is that Webtop and D2 are also installed on the same doc base and that both clients access, modify and import documents to the same cabinets. That means we have a data overlap between Webtop and D2. This is a bit more complex because you have to make sure that both clients provide the same functionalities, meaning that the data stays consistent no matter which client is used. Yeah? So for example, if you import a document or if you modify a document, then both clients have to provide or have to apply the same features. That means that you cannot use perhaps the auto-naming or auto-linking or security features which you can configure in D2, because these configurations are only applied to the documents when you use D2 instead of Webtop. Okay, let's talk about a project approach we often use when the customer wants to migrate from Webtop to D2 to deliver a successful project. So first, it's very important to collect the requirements of the Webtop application and to evaluate these requirements against D2. What is possible and what is not possible with D2, because in some cases a Webtop and D2 are different. After that, we often configure a prototype or a POC to see if we can implement all these requirements with D2 and present this prototype to the business users to get direct feedback from them if they are sufficient with the D2 solution. This is possible through the configuration, and this is also an advantage because you can create a prototype faster than a Webtop application. And then the customer can decide if they want to migrate a Webtop application to this to D2, and of course you can do this approach for all of your Webtop applications. And in our experience, this is a very successful project approach, and the business users like this approach because they know in an early phase of a project what they will get with the D2 solution. So lessons learned from our previous D2 projects. So first of all, we have the experience of reduced project duration and costs. Through the configuration, you can implement and deliver D2 solutions faster than Webtop solutions because the configuration is faster and easier than customization and coding with Webtop. The second experience we've made is that the business or the business users is often more compromised if requirements can be implemented just by configuration. That means that the business has often very high and very complex requirements, and when you can offer them a very cheap and very fast implementation of this requirement, then they are often compromised with this solution. Configuration approach is faster and more flexible than webtop customizations. I already mentioned this, and this is very easy to understand. So a configuration, for example, for the property page or the configuration for unique number can be made in seconds compared to a webtop or WGK component where you have to create the XML file, the JSP file, for example, the Java class, and you have to deploy all this stuff to the application, and this needs, of course, more time. And you're not so flexible when you want to change something. Custom webtop code can be replaced by configuration in a lot of cases. We already mentioned this in this webinar. So D2 offers features and configuration possibilities to configure requirements which were coded with webtop. Documentum D2 is not webtop. It cannot 100% replace it by look and feel, especially when there is a high level of customization involved. So D2 and webtop, both clients are content-centric clients, and this is the main use case for these clients. But D2 is in some cases different than webtop. So for example, if you create or import a document, then the wizard looks different and the steps are also different. So you have to make sure that your requirements can be implemented in D2. Our experience is that most of the requirements can be implemented with D2, but you have to check if all the customizations and requirements can be replaced by D2. Existing data model might need to be changed or extended. So especially when you use the new D2 features of auto-naming and auto-linking, then you often have to extend the data model for the additional attributes. So the last experience we've made, prototypes and POCs can be implemented pretty quick and can help to guide faster to the planned solution. I also already mentioned this. So through the configuration, you can implement prototypes and POC, which you can present to the business very fast. And the advantage is that the business knows what they will get with the upcoming D2 solution. So thank you very much. This is from my side, and now I want to give over to Roger from Adlib, which presents you how to use Adlib with D2.
So thanks again for having me join today's session. As I mentioned, perhaps to myself, I guess, we're going to be looking at this idea of providing advanced rendering within Documentum. So what we found in the industry is that enterprise content management is a bit of an odd misnomer where the content part often goes missing. So people are so focused on the enterprise and the management side, which makes perfect sense. If you think about the D2 discussion that we've just finished having, there are a lot of great features, mostly around things like management capabilities, usability, search, configuration, ease of deployment, those types of considerations. But oftentimes what we're missing is the actual content, sort of the reason for being behind the scenes. So if I look at the evolution of content rendering within enterprise content management systems, there's been this shift from shareware or freeware to maybe basic rendering capabilities at the desktop level to increasingly a focus on advanced rendering. So advanced rendering, just to put a frame around it, is really taking PDFing to the next level. So it's providing a number of features, things like accuracy and high fidelity, automation, multiple file type support, multiple output formats, so not just PDF, but PDF-A, thumbnail, TIFF. And it's also something that is enterprise grade, so it involves scalability and IT considerations like high availability, load balancing, and the like. And the challenge that organizations have, of course, is that within Documentum, the state of rendering has been shifting. So within Documentum 6, or ADTS 6, so to speak, you've got some of those advanced rendering capabilities, but it's really more for out-of-the-box users, and it doesn't really have that enterprise-grade functionality that I alluded to. And for those organizations who are maybe on Documentum 7, looking at ADTS or CTS 7, there's been a big shift. And so now what you have is actually basic rendering capability. So there's no advanced rendering by default in the new version of Documentum. So it's really good for office-type documents and basic collaboration, but it's not so useful when you look at more complex scenarios. So really you need to be considerate of a number of different content issues. So things like support for the latest version of Office, support for file types like Visio, InfoPath, CAD is a big issue, PDF-A versus PDF, OCRing, being able to support searchability or findability within your information. Things like compression is increasingly becoming a consideration for organizations with suffering from sort of infobesity or excess of information. How do you get all this information within your Documentum environment? How do you manage that content in a way that is suitable and robust? So what we've been looking at is how do we add advanced rendering capabilities to the Documentum environment, both D6 and D7, and for that matter, beyond. So adding, enterprise functionality to the D6 environment by addressing things like job loss, job invisibility, multiple UIs, and really that limited scalability. So with the addition of advanced rendering through solutions like Adlib's enterprise product, you can address those kind of concerns. And within the D7 environment, Adlib can provide, again, that advanced rendering partnership. We were actually an EMC certified and EMC recommended for these kind of capabilities within the D7 universe. So being able to provide, again, that diverse input, so supporting well over 400 different file types, providing that high fidelity type scenario, particularly useful, the high fidelity and robust publishing, particularly critical for life sciences and really any compliance or regulated industry. Again, those enterprise-grade capabilities that I alluded to in terms of job management, and of course shared services, so being able to use advanced rendering not only within the Documentum environment, but across Documentum 6, Documentum 7, and beyond into SharePoint and perhaps FileNet and other repositories, maybe file shares, maybe PLM systems. So that's really what we look at when we talk about advanced rendering is something that goes well beyond the idea of simply converting to PDF, a simple Office document. And Adlib, of course, has an integration directly within Documentum, as I mentioned, Documentum 6, Documentum 7, and it surfaces within the D2 interface. So you can see, I've just taken a couple little screenshots from one of our demos. There's a right-click option on the one circle there showing Create PDF with Adlib. So you can do that straight from the D2 interface. You can also do creative things like surfacing thumbnails for improved usability or viewability. Within that D2 interface. So there's a lot of really powerful tools that you can add on to that D2 deployment. So this is why we work so closely with FME to make sure that when you deploy D2, you're getting not only the technical attributes, but also the document attributes or considerations that are important. So ultimately, whether you're upgrading to Documentum 7 or maintaining Documentum 6, if you're looking at advanced capabilities, either from a D2 interface perspective or from a document control, document output, document management perspective, we can partner through FME to deliver the kind of capabilities that you need for a successful Documentum deployment. And with that, I will pass it back to my colleagues from FME to close off today's session, and I will thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Roger. we're coming up to about, we're a little one past right now, but we just wanted to talk to you a little bit about our offering. We're offering an on-site or remote assessment 1 day free of charge where we'll analyze all of your existing client applications and take a look at your environment and what you're using today and classify the customizations and requirements and then recommend a tailored client strategy moving forward in the future if you have interest in this. And then we just wanted to mention, Manuela talked about Migration Center. There is a dedicated Migration Center website where it has all of our product information, customer and partner reviews, references, and to note a free trial version. We used to have a free download version available, but now we're making the full version, any out-of-the-box migration path that we offer. There's about 80 of them now, 80 different migration paths, and you can recommend your 2-week evaluation trial at any time through the website. Well, thank you, everybody, and thanks to all our presenters. Hope everyone has a great day or evening.